Welcome to From Age to Age, an oral history podcast series about the parish history and hopes for the future from the Church of St. Francis Xavier in New York City. The Oral History Project was conceived to preserve the unique history of this church by inviting our longtime parishioners to share their personal stories, illustrating why this parish is distinctive, unique, and a very special place.
Here I am, Lord. Well, good morning, Miss B.
Good morning, Miss Ann. How are you?
I'm actually excited to be doing this, even as sleepy as I am at 9 o'clock in the morning. But I'm excited because I'm interviewing a longtime friend and wonderful parishioner. How did you get to Xavier?
How did I get to Xavier? Oh, my gosh. Well, I moved to New York in 2002, and I was going for spiritual direction. And I was talking to my spiritual director about a very bad experience I had at my local parish. I went there occasionally, but it was a really hard place to go to church. Nobody spoke. People didn't say hi going in and out of church. And I was one of the few people of color there. So things were going okay there, except that one Sunday, the priest started to talk about, he said, you know, when I was growing up in the South Bronx, everybody was really nice. And, you know, parents looked out for other kids' children and blah, blah, blah. And then he said, but, you know, with all those Blacks and Puerto Ricans living there now, it's really gone downhill. I got out of my seat and I walked out of the church and I went right home to my computer and I wrote a letter, a very terse letter to Cardinal Egan. And I said, I can't believe I actually heard this in church. Mm-hmm. So I said to my spiritual director, gosh, I said, you know, I had this horrible experience in church. And so we talked, and then afterwards she said to me, you know, I know this great parish in Manhattan with these great people, and you like music, and you're going to love it. I'm just going to encourage you to go. So one Sunday I said, this is far from home, 45 minutes in the car. I went, and the music was just completely amazing. I was crying in the pew. I said, this church is amazing. Ned Coughlin gave an amazing homily, and I said, you know what? I think I can fit here. So the next Sunday, I went back for direction the next month, and she said, oh, you went? She said, so you know what? She said, you need to meet my friends, you know? My friends Wendell and Jackie and Ann Harris Jacobs. So me, who is definitely an introvert, I was like, oh, these people are going to think I'm crazy.
We didn't think you were crazy at all.
So I go up to you all and I say, hi, I know Sister Patricia Ann Dwyer, and she said I should come here to church. So she said, you know, Ann, you all were so lovely, you and Jackie, you know, right away came right up and started talking to me, and, you know, and then I got invited to sing. You know, I auditioned for the choir, and then I was invited by Jackie to sing with the Ignatian Schola. So, you know, that was really my connection in, my initial connection in. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, you know, as time went on, I just really deeply appreciated the quality of the liturgy, the quality of the preaching, the quality of the music, and just the whole sense of community. Because people said hi at the door.
Well, that is unusual because I had similar experience with myself before I came to Xavier. Same kind of situation with people not saying hi. You know, where's the hospitality? There's no hospitality here.
I know.
And from what I understand, that is one of the greatest sins, according to what I've read in Scripture. So hospitality is something Xavier has really attempted to do very well. And we continue to do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm very happy, not for the experience you had, but it sent you to us.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Well, what kept you here?
I think what kept me here were a couple of things. One thing that I really deeply appreciated was Ned Coughlin inviting me to the preaching forum, you know, to that preaching seminar. And, you know, I was surprised. I thought, he doesn't know me from Adam and Eve. Like, who am I? But he knew I worked for the Jesuits in school.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he knew you, he knew Jackie and other people in the parish. And, I just thought, wow, this is pretty amazing that I'm being invited to this preaching seminar. And then when we had the opportunity to preach, that was so amazing for me. I just thought to myself, gosh, like I never really felt like I would ever use that preaching course that I took many years ago in graduate school when I thought, why am I sitting in a preaching course when there's a bunch of priests in here and seminarians and I'm never going to get the chance to preach? But I did have the opportunity to preach at graduate school. And I just felt that this was such a wonderful opportunity and that, we were really seen as the women who were preaching were really seen as equals,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that we were on that rotating basis with the priests and that Ned really honored that. So that kept me. And then even after Ned left and, we had other pastors and other things occurred, again, I was grateful Dan Carew invited me to preach again. And that was just such a blessing for me. I did Good Friday twice. I was invited to do Good Friday. And I just really deeply loved the way that I was able to use those gifts that I feel that I have. So that was great.
That's the one thing that we all loved about Ned, or most of us loved about Ned, is that he asked all of us to live out our baptismal promises and whatnot. We were given a lot of things at baptism, and he felt very strongly that just because we were women, we shouldn't have the opportunity to do that. He wanted to make sure that we all got an opportunity to use our gifts. And you certainly used a lot of yours at Xavier. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, then certainly I was still in the choir and, I appreciated the variety of music. We expanded our horizons over the years, shall I say, with the inclusion of more music that was not mainstream Catholic music. I don't want to use the word folk music, but, kind of like the mainstream liturgical music. We started to incorporate other languages. We had the bilingual Spanish, English mass parts. We had African texts. We had African American spirituals, so I was grateful that that was heard and we continued to expand that. We did the Mary Lou Williams Mass. So all that was great. And then in the context of my work at St. Peter's Prep, and I became a spiritual director, then I was able to connect into the Ignatian Spirituality and Everyday Life program at Xavier. And I was really happy to be able to direct people in the 19th annotation and also, plan retreats and connect into people being monthly directees. So that certainly is a gift. And, I think too, connecting into the racial justice group after George Floyd died and we began to take a little closer look at what was happening. We were able to connect with the St. Charles Borromeo and St. Francis de Sales with the Catholic Anti-Racism Project. I think that really helped to facilitate in a bigger way what was really happening in the church that sometimes we're unwilling to talk about. I say people don't like to talk about race because it's very uncomfortable. So this was conversation that could be had, I felt, with people who were willing to stretch a little more. And so as a result of that, we have the Racial Justice Pledge at the end of Mass. And, CARP had a meeting just recently. And I think we're able to make some progress there just to raise people's awareness. I think that's really crucial. Change minds and hearts. That's maybe a little stretch, but at least making people aware, I think is really important. So, yeah, it's a good thing.
Is that the one major thing you think that's changed at Xavier, the whole racial intentionality in terms of being aware?
I think people are more aware. I say sometimes that people of goodwill don't always have the ability to act on that goodwill.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of nice to say, oh, that's nice. We have a racial justice pledge, but what are you doing about it?
Yeah.
As St. Ignatian says, action is seen more readily in deeds than words, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are you actually doing about it? So I feel as though, even though maybe people aren't acting a whole lot, at least I feel like it's like being poked.
Mm-hmm.
You get
Mm-hmm.
poked and you keep getting poked, and then eventually you're going to have to turn around and say, okay, why are you poking me? What's going on here? So I think that for our parishioners, and our community is largely white, I think for many of our white parishioners who maybe have not connected into the racial issue,
Mm-hmm.
I think now more and more people are beginning to see how race is so intimately connected with so many issues. Church, we have a very large LGBTQ plus community, and people are able, I think, now to see more and more how race is really connected to all the issues connected to LGBTQ plus,
Mm-hmm.
connected to poverty,
Mm-hmm.
connected to homelessness, connected to all those issues,
Mm-hmm.
immigration. Hopefully the poking will
Mm-hmm.
continue,
Mm-hmm.
and people will continue to be aware and
Mm-hmm.
act.
Well, it certainly speaks to the fact that Xavier thinks of itself as being a very diverse parish.
Mm-hmm.
And even with the absence of people of color, that doesn't really have anything to do with Xavier per se. It has to do with the geography around Xavier more than anything else. Many people of color who, identify as African American or Caribbean American were not Catholic to begin with. There are very few of us who have been Catholic from birth. Many people have been gone through RCIA, or what they used to call in my day convert classes. I hated that word. And that's the way most white people think that Blacks have come to the church. And both of us have been cradle Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a surprise to some people because they can't figure out how that could be possible. And yet, here we are.
Yeah.
But Xavier really is trying very hard to be a very diverse and very inclusive and a very open parish to anybody who is a seeker, who wants to come. And I think you've talked about that a great deal in what you've said. And it brings me to ask, how would you tell other people about Xavier?
Well, I talk about Xavier all the time.
I wonder why.
I show my face up here now that I'm living in Philadelphia right now, but hopefully that's not for the rest of my life. I would say that I always talk about Xavier being inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of where you're coming from, I think if you're marginally religious, marginally Catholic, all in Catholic, all in religious, wherever you are in that space, I think that you are welcome at Xavier. Walking into our church and seeing, in the wintertime, a person who is homeless, who has their things with them in the pew, and in the same pew is a woman with a fur coat on. I say that's like, for me, the ultimate test of, we're not chasing the homeless out. We're not chasing the person that has their bags there out. We are welcoming of everybody. And many of the people who are our guests downstairs on a Sunday, I see them in church. And I think that says a lot about where we're coming from. More and more now I see young families, I see young people at church. That 5:00 Sunday Mass, during the school year is pretty full with young people from the colleges in the area. And I think that that's another testimony that says that, regardless of your age, you're welcome at Xavier. And I think our community has become more racial and ethnically diverse. over the last 10 years.
Mhm, mhm.
And I think that's due to people being welcoming.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm.
when you look at the span of people who are baptized at the Easter Vigil
Right.
or are, come into the church who are confirmed, you see the rainbow.
Mhm,
You
mhm,
see every color, every ethnic group. So I think that's a great testimony to the fact that the church is open.
mhm.
Sure, we had our missteps, sure, but I think the majority of it has been very, very open and very welcoming.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think of our new um, portraits that are around the church of
Oh, so great. It's so great. It's so great. Yeah, I
part of that
remember.
inclusivity?
Yeah, I think that for me, the real twist of it was the little boy who saw the Asian
Mhm,
saint and said, "Gosh, he looks like me."
mhm,
Xavier was built at a time when everybody in the church there, for the most part, was white and probably of, the ethnic groups that are white, probably many Irish, many, maybe many Germans or many people from European countries. And so the statues there look like them, which
mhm,
is makes total sense.
mhm, mhm,
But as we know, over time, we become more aware of, who's in the church. It's everybody,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And so just to see those portraits around the church says to me that, again, Xavier is open to everybody. That was a long-term project. That project had a lot of conversation
I'm sure it
and a
did.
lot of input and a lot of going around the block and coming back again. And I know finally when the decision was made to hire the artist, initially it was a little struggle, but people started to open up and say, "Hey, isn't this great that we can honor
Mhm,
these saints who are part of our church?" Even if we don't see them, they're there.
mhm.
They are there. So I think it was a great testimony to the openness of the community to
Mhm.
have that conversation about having the art.
I was thinking of what you might say to the Xavier community, to our parish staff, as to where you think we should be going next.
There's often a practice in the Black church of sharing pulpits. And
Hmm.
I know we've done this in a little bit of a way before.
Mhm,
I think that one of the African American Jesuits has been here for Juneteenth.
mm,
And, we've had other presiders from other places,
mhm,
do conversations or at least have, even if it can't be mass, it might be a conversation.
mhm,
But I would love to see more of that. And
mhm,
I would really hope that now that we're with CARP, that that could really happen. I would love for the possibility of having our pastor go to St. Francis de Sales or to St. Charles, or even beyond that,
mhm,
would love to see more choir sharing.
mm,
Would love to see, how about the choir from St. Francis de Sales or the choir from St. Charles or the choir from wherever
mhm,
come to Xavier and sing and our choir go to their church to sing. I think that would be a great way of making more of a connection,
mhm,
with the wider church,
mhm.
especially now that parishes are closing and merging. I mean, that's happened here and, it's happening all over the country. I think it's great for people to be able to come together to say, yes, we go to this parish on Sunday usually, but there's a church out there that's bigger than just the confines of our own parish.
Mhm. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to
Um,
comment on?
I just would like to say that I have been appreciative of all of the leadership that our parish has, from our parish staff, from our pastors, the priests the Jesuits who are our assistants, who come here on a Sunday to preach, all of them really bring their gifts to the table. And I've been really grateful that, as I say about Xavier, you're never going to get a bad homily. You're never going to get something that you can't take home with you to, put in your heart for the week. And, I've just been really grateful for that. I've been grateful for the really extensive religious education program that we have. As a teacher and somebody who's taught theology for many years, I'm really grateful to see parents here on a Sunday with their children and that there's a parent component to that program. I'm grateful for all the things that the Xavier Mission does. What Cassie and her staff has done for our parish. I think it's intimately connected to the fabric of our parish. Whenever they have the graduation ceremony, the LSTEP graduation, get your tissues out because you're going to be hearing these beautiful stories from people who have been really transformed by, their progress in life. And I'm just grateful for the music. I'm grateful for the extensiveness of the choir, our cantors. I just have to say that I wish we could clone Xavier and take it out to the church because we need more of Xavier in the church right now. Yeah.
Well, I don't think you'll get too many arguments about that.
Let us pray to the Lord, hear our prayer.
Amen to that. Well, we've come to the end of our conversation.
Well, Anne, thank you so much. It's been great to talk to you. You were the first person I met at Xavier all those many years ago. And so grateful for you and for your gifts of music and spiritual direction as well. And your contributions to the parish long before I came here.
Well, not that long, but anyway, thank you so much. And it was really fun to talk to you because we don't get a chance to do this very much anymore.
Indeed.
And it certainly brought back a lot of memories of the days that we first met and got to know one another. So this was really a plus for me to be able to do that.
Great. And it was a plus for me too, Anne. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
Here I am, Lord, I come to do your
The music you are hearing is provided by the Xavier Music Ministry. From Age to Age is produced by St. Francis Xavier Church in New York City. This episode was recorded and edited by Cynthia Bastidas for Semillita Productions. A special thanks to the staff of St. Francis Xavier, Xavier High School, and Father Kenneth Bowler. Join us on our next episode. To learn more about St. Francis Xavier, visit sfxavier.org and look for us on social media. All copyrighted music reproduced with the permission of one licensed copyright, A-70000530, rights reserved. Music reprint license number 944. From downtown Manhattan, we wish you a blessed morning, day, or night.